If you are a new gardener and you're looking into starting your first garden this year, you're not going to want to miss this video today because I'm going to be talking about 3 mistakes that new gardeners often make. So you won't be making the same mistakes that I did when I first started my garden. So stick around. Welcome back to Once Upon a Tiny Farm. My name's Drew, and if you're new here, I am starting a new video series called the 400 Square Foot Garden, and I'll put a link to that somewhere up here and down in the show notes. If you want to follow along as I recreate the very first garden that we made in this spot right here behind me that's overgrown with weeds, which I'll get into in a minute, the weeds. But if you want to follow along with what we're doing, we're creating a brand new garden here from scratch, and it's going to be the most efficient garden in a small space as you possibly could make. And this is a 20 by 20 space, and I'm going to be placing out very soon my raised beds, and I have a plan for a crop plan to grow food in successions from starting in like April all the way up into November. So if that's something that you're interested in getting into growing food the entirety of the growing season, I have a plan. You could click down in the link for the show notes for the 400 square foot garden plan, and you can get that for free. But anyway, let's get into the first thing that I think new gardeners get wrong, and that is not focusing on the soil. Now, when we first started our garden, I'm a little ashamed to admit it because I don't do this practice anymore, but we actually tilled this soil right here behind me. And there's plenty of reasons why I did that. There's a lot of reasons why I no longer till. And one of them is because it destroys the activity down in the soil. It's very disturbing to the microorganisms and the bugs and everything going on in the soil. If you do a deep tillage, you're just destroying all of that life. And I didn't realize that when I first started gardening. So I tilled this whole area, but we needed to till because this was just grass and I didn't know any better way to get rid of the grass. One really easy way that I learned to kill grass, to create a growing area, is putting down a black tarp. This is called a silage tarp, and I put this over this area to kill off the crop debris. That there are 3 rows here, and I have this covered, and in the spring I will remove this tarp and most of those weeds will hopefully have died, and I will just have to rake off the dead crop debris and I'll be able to plant into it. But if you were starting a brand new garden area, a silage tarp would be a really good way to go. If you have the time to let the silage tarp sit and get baked under the sun, it will cook all of the grass or whatever is growing beneath the silage tarp. So in a couple of months, depending on what time of the season it is, right now in the winter, this will take a longer time to kill what's beneath. In the summer, it might take a few weeks because of how hot it is. But you could lay down a tarp, let the sun and nature do its job, kill what's beneath, and then you could put down cardboard and layer in some compost to build your rows without tilling. That is the perfect way to start a new garden, and that's one that I'm going to demonstrate in a future video. But like I said, when I first started my garden, I didn't know any better. So I tilled this area. I tilled it, and it was actually really hard to till, I remember, because there was still lots of grass here. I probably should have cut the grass lower than it was, so I had to work really hard with the tiller. And another thing that I hated about the tiller that I found out in the years and years to come is that when you till, you're bringing up dormant weed seeds from deep down in the soil, and you're bringing those weed seeds up to the surface that you obviously don't want. And that was like 4 or 5 years ago, and you could see all those weeds behind me still today are coming up year after year, and it's been really hard to manage those weeds, which is one of those reasons why I'm going to start this whole garden over from scratch with a really nice looking raised bed system. So that's something I'm going to be explaining in a very soon in a new video. So when you're planting something in the garden, it's not as simple as just putting a plant in the ground. I mean, it is actually that easy, but if the soil isn't right, that plant isn't going to grow. So the soil is the most important thing to focus on as a new gardener, and something to always be thinking about: the soil conditions. And there's tools and different things that you could use to make the soil conditions better. And there are compost teas and things that you could spray onto the soil that's not chemical spray, but an actual biological spray that's very extremely natural and will help flourish even the poorest of soils. And that's something I think I'm going to get into in future videos as well. But my first year when I was gardening, we simply started some seeds in trays. Anybody could do that. And we planted them in what was just thick clay, which is what most of us, at least in my area, what I have beneath my grass, I have a thick clay, and there's not much life in the clay soil. It's so thick, and for plants to grow nice healthy roots, they need fluffy soil, they need a loose subsoil, and I didn't give it that. And I couldn't figure out why my pepper plant that I grew that first year didn't grow in the clay subsoil. It's because I didn't give it the right environment to grow and thrive. So tip number one is to focus on the soil. Bring in really good high quality compost. Make it yourself if you know how to do that, or there's plenty of videos on YouTube on how to create your own compost pile. But when you're starting your first garden, I would highly suggest focusing on bringing in the best quality soil that you could find. Bring in some high quality compost. There's some good biological activity in that compost, and that'll be a good way to start your gardens. Now, the second mistake I think a lot of new gardeners make is they don't succession plant. What succession planting is, planning out what times to plant your crop so that you always have a crop to pick from in your garden. So when I first started my garden, I just created some really nice looking raised beds. I filled them with lots of soil, and I planted everything one time. I didn't even think about planting multiple plantings of lettuce, of carrots, because I didn't even, I don't know why, it just didn't cross my mind that I didn't want to just have one harvest. Because in my zone here, we're in zone 6B, we have a good 5, 6, 7 months, depending on how the swing seasons go in the spring and the fall, of good growing time. And most of these crops that we're growing is 2 months or less. So you could have up to 2 or 3 successions of things like carrots, of tomatoes, of cucumbers, whatever you want to grow. A lot of those things you can grow more than once and plan it out to always have that crop in the garden. And it's very sad when your cucumber plant died and you don't have any more cucumbers that you have planted to have more cucumbers later in the summer. So if that's something that you're interested in, it took me quite a few years to start getting that figured out and dialed in. That is something that's a big feature in my 400 square foot garden plan, and you could click the link in the details below this video and sign up to get my free PDF for the 400 square foot garden. And you could work off of my crop plan. Even if you don't want to do this 400 square foot garden as I'm doing it in this 20 by 20 space, you could use those dates for my succession planning in my crop plan to basically use it yourself in your own garden, whatever size that you want to do. If you use my crop plan for your own garden, you could figure out ways to make sure that you're always planting whatever it is that you want to plant, whether it's lettuce, whether it's carrots, spinach, radish. I throw in a lot of different crops in my crop plan because I'm targeting the beginner gardener, and I think the more things that you could practice growing, the better gardener that you're going to be in the future. So check out that 400 square foot garden plan, like I mentioned in the details below this video. Now, the third and final thing that I think new gardeners often will get wrong in their gardens is picking the wrong location for their garden plot. Now, this is something that I figured out over time, that I picked the wrong spot. For instance, we planted a line of bushes here in front of our house, which is kind of a mess here. We planted this line of bushes that never really got any bigger than this. And we couldn't figure out, for a while we thought it was just the soil, or we didn't know what the reason was. And we figure out that it's because of the shade that our house is putting out in front, where we planted those, that they're just not getting enough sunlight. And the same thing for a hydrangea that we planted right at the edge of our house. It just doesn't get enough sunlight. So if things aren't getting enough sunlight, they're not going to grow like they're supposed to grow. So an important thing to think about when you're planning where you're going to put your garden is make sure that it gets sunlight almost the entire day, or as much sunlight as possible. Know where the sun comes up in the morning. So here on our property here, the sun rises right up there in the sky, and all day it moves this way. So all day, this spot right here gets unobstructed, it gets sunlight all day long. A little bit less in the winter because the sun is lower in the sky and we get some blockage from trees and stuff like that. But in the summertime, we get sun here all day long. So this is a good spot for us. When we first started our garden, we planted some things actually on the other side of our property, and we planted it at another spot back where there were too many trees and there was too much shade and there was just not enough sunlight, and I planted a pepper plant that didn't grow. And yeah, that was a quick learning experience. I just picked the wrong location for it. So be very cognizant of where you're putting your garden. Think about the sun and how much sun that area is going to get all day long. It's a very simple thing to do. Take the time to think and figure it out so you don't make those mistakes in your garden. And I don't want anybody to get discouraged about starting a garden, because gardening is supposed to be fun and peaceful, relaxing, enjoying. And if you're setting yourself up by making some simple mistakes early on, you're going to get discouraged, and I don't want that. So don't make those mistakes, and you're going to be better off. And that's going to wrap up this quick video on 3 mistakes I think new gardeners often make. I hope you don't make these same mistakes that I did, and I hope your new garden thrives in the new year. Like I said, check out that 400 square foot garden plan I have in the show notes below this video. Thanks for watching. Hey, if you're new here, please hit the subscribe button. We're 10 subscribers away at the moment of me filming this video of hitting 1,000 subscribers. And that was my goal this year. I've only got 2 more days to do it. So it'd be really helpful, and I'd be very thankful if you hit that subscribe button if you like this video. All right, thanks for watching. Also, give it a thumbs up if you found this helpful. I'd really appreciate it. All right, thanks for watching. We will see you in the next one.